Hello, and welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast. I'm Joe Devine, and today I was delighted to be joined by Andrés Cantor. Andrés is an Argentinian-American sportscaster and pundit who works in the United States of America, providing predominantly Spanish-language commentary and analysis in sports. He works for Telemundo, which is NBC's sports Spanish-language division, but has been calling football matches for a very long time. And he describes at the beginning of this podcast how he was the only Spanish-language commentator working in America for some time. So there was next to no competition, which is really interesting. Andrés has commentated at World Cups. He commentates on Premier League football for a Spanish-speaking American audience. He commentates on Liga MX too. He's absolutely fantastic at his job, and his calling card, really, many of you listening will have heard it, whether you realise it comes from Andrés or not, is the sort of extenuated goal. I can't do it. I'm not calling, I wouldn't do it justice. But it's really become a calling card for him, and he's considered to just be one of the best commentators in world football. And this year he's about to enter his 21st year at Telemundo, which is an absolutely incredible achievement, and was previously working for another broadcaster for 15 years before that. So this guy is an eminent professional. He knows his job incredibly well. As a result of the fact that my job involves me doing voiceovers and podcasts, I did geek out a little bit and ask him about pronunciations and preparation, stuff like that, which I find fascinating. And at one point he told me that pre-internet, to make sure that he got the pronunciations of players' names correct, he called every embassy in the United States of a country that was featuring in this particular World Cup to get their assistance for a name pronunciation, which is just, I would have never thought to do that, but that is an amazing idea. He's also done some commentary in English, so we talk about the difference between, commentating in Spanish and commentating in English. We talk a little bit about the cultural difference between the two as well. And I couldn't help but ask Andrés, who was born in Buenos Aires, about the Lionel Messi situation as well, to hear his take on it. But a fascinating interview. Thanks so much to Andrés for coming and featuring on the Tifo Football Podcast. I hope you listening enjoy this today, and thank you for downloading. And I had a lovely break. I'm back now. Thanks for listening to Seb and Alex in my absence, and I know that can't have been easy. So much appreciated. And on with today's episode. I will leave you in the warm hands and the cool embrace, very cool today, the very cool embrace of Andrés Cantor. So Andrés, the first thing I want to ask you is that you moved to the States as a teenager, but beforehand you grew up in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And doing some reading about you, I stumbled across this thing. You were very inspired by an Argentinian commentator called Jose Maria Munoz, who was a radio commentator. Is that right?
That is correct. He was the radio commentator. Way back in the days that I grew up, radio was very, very powerful, even more, I would say, than television. We only had 4 television channels. Only one of them broadcasted football on TV, and only one game per weekend, obviously. So the kids of my age, we all listened to him. He had a great rhythm to his calls. He had a great vocabulary, and it was just lots of fun listening to him. So we all pretty much grew up with the radio glued to our ears, listening to our teams. And wherever we went out to the park with our friends or in the club with our teams, we emulated his calls when we scored the goal. So he was very, very popular. I mean, he was the number one guy that everyone listened to back in the day in Argentina. So he was a big influence later on, obviously, in my career.
Reading about him, it says that he was considered to be the godfather of shouting "goal, goal, 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 goal" as a goal was scored, and apparently that is because he wanted people who were further away from the radio or people who'd left the room to be able to hear that a goal had happened. Is that really the genesis of that art?
It might be. The goal call, at least in Latin America, has had its own evolution. He was, he didn't have one long goal call. he did, like you just said, he did call it several times, and that might be the genesis of why he did it. Before him, it was just, pretty much like the English broadcasters do it. Just he scored, it's a goal. But then, I don't know what it was, if it's just because we became more passionate, because football became more important, or what it is that, we became more and more enthusiastic and effusive in our goal calls. But yes, he did have a style where he called the goal call perhaps not as long, but, short, and repeatedly he said the word goal after each score.
And what was it for you? So when you started calling, and when you developed your signature long goal call, what is it for you about that? Is it are you trying to display a passion, or what do you think?
Well, it's really the way we feel the game nowadays. If you see the stands in Latin America in any league game, Copa Libertadores game, or national team game, you will see whenever a goal is scored that people yell goal the same way broadcasters yell goal. That is our way of feeling for the game, I guess. And broadcasters have this particular style where at the end and the culmination of a good play, whenever there is a score, we just let our passion take over and yell goal the way we do. It's something pretty much cultural than I would say anything else.
Yeah, I want to come back and ask you a little bit about the differences between the culture of English language and Spanish language commentary. For now, though, can I ask you? I mean, you've been, you're about to, or you're celebrating 20 years of working at Telemundo as the lead commentator. You're going into your 21st year, which is an incredible achievement. Do you still have the passion for football? Like when when a goal goes in on your average midweek game and you do your goal call, does it still feel the same way it did 10, 20 years ago?
Yes, I'm going into my 21st year in Telemundo, and I worked 15 years at the other network calling games. So I've been around for a long while. And I always say, just like when you read, when you ask a 36-year-old player, do you still like football? Do you like, waking up in the morning and going to training? And they always say the same thing. They always say, the day that I don't feel like waking up and training, that day I will think about retirement. And in my case, and I don't know about, the other broadcasters, but yes, I have the best day of the week, which happens to fall pretty much every week on a weekend, is either Saturday or Sunday when I get to call a game. And I call it with the same enthusiasm as day one. So the day that I don't have that fire within me and that desire to go call a game, that day I'll be thinking that something is wrong. But for now, I enjoy getting in the booth, going to the stadium, wherever I happen to get to call the game. That is the best day and the best 2 hours of my week.
Yeah. Hey, maybe you'll be going until your voice gives out. Do you think what is it? Will it be you or your voice first?
Oh, I hope neither. In 30 plus years, I haven't lost my voice once. I mean, I became very hoarse and had to fight a couple of broadcasts to make it to the end. But, I will make sure that obviously I take care of my working instrument, which are my pipes. And I hope they last a long time.
So let's go back to the beginning then. You moved to the States as a teenager. How does one get into football commentary? How did you do it at the time?
Well, basically, I went to college here at USC, the University of Southern California. I took 4 years of journalism. I always wanted to be a writer. As a matter of fact, I did not envision being either on radio or television. I guess you'd say I had one of those lucky breaks because the only television network at the time called me for an audition to record 2 soccer games. I recorded the first one doing color commentary. We broke for lunch, and the person who ended up being my boss that hired me within a week said, we are really looking for a play-by-play announcer. Do you think you can do the second game? You can do the play-by-play on the second game that we're going to tape. And I said, sure, why not? I gave him, though, the heads up that I had never done play-by-play in my life other than in my head when I was a kid, listening to the radio. And I guess he liked my style and offered me a job within a week. And why do I say that it's one of those lucky breaks in life? Because way back then, as I said, there was only one television network in Spanish in the US, and it happened to be the only one that showed soccer or football. So I auditioned for the only job in the country of a football play-by-play announcer. So I was very lucky to be the only football play-by-play announcer of that network for the next 15 years, and ended up calling an average, I would say, of 200 to 250 matches per calendar year, because we started picking up lots of properties: the World Cup qualifying, Copa America, European Cup, Liga MX from Mexico, etc. And I was the only play-by-play announcer for 15 years or 14 years in that network. So I had the dream job in that time.
Let's talk about the World Cups then. What was the first World Cup that you worked at?
The very first one I covered was Mexico in 1986 for Editorial Atlántida of Argentina as a written journalist for El Gráfico magazine, which used to be like the Bible in Hispanic media throughout the Hispanic world, not only in Argentina, but everywhere that Spanish was read and spoken.
Yeah.
And also I covered for the same company for another more like political-based magazine called Somos. So I covered as a print journalist the 1986 World Cup. I was already around the press, my press friends of El Gráfico magazine in Spain in 1982. But then, I was 19. I had a great time just, being around them. And then my very first one as an accredited media was 1986 in Mexico.
And do you ever wish that you had been calling games at the time? And did you see Diego Maradona's goal of the century? Were you at that game?
I was.
Wow.
I wish, in retrospect, I didn't have yet any inclinations to become a broadcaster, neither in radio nor television. So in retrospect, I could tell you, I wish I had a microphone in my hand for the goal of the century. That was one of the happiest moments of my life, just being there and witnessing that goal. And if you care to ask me about the first one, in all honesty, we didn't figure out that it was, scored with his hand until we got back to the hotel and saw the replays, on television. So we were just, we left the stadium with the, with a clear image of that second goal that stands in, my thoughts, my memory, my mind every day. That was the most exquisite goal I ever witnessed in person, at least.
Can I say, from the perspective of an Englishman having this conversation, I'm delighted to be having it now, because I feel like enough time has passed that the so-called, hand of God goal, the controversy, whatever, has died down enough. People aren't upset anymore, and we can just, we can relish the goal of the century, because it's almost a shame that they took place in the same game. One of those, in this country at least, overshadowed the other. But it's a fantastic goal.
Yeah, and of course now the discussion becomes even greater, even though we are very many years removed from the controversy. But with the implementation of VAR, there's lots of pundits, and I've read that the hand of God wouldn't have counted, and the Lampard goal would have stood. And then, you don't know what would have happened in 1966, but I don't think it's fair to bring, technology of 2020 and start talking about things that happened in a totally different era of football. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely. With a ball that wouldn't even fly in the same direction or in the same way, or
sure,
with boots that weren't, as technologically advanced or whatever, right?
exactly.
No, I think so. So you did call games at 1990 World Cup though, right?
Yes, that was my first World Cup in television. I've called every single one of those games in Italy, 90. I've called every single World Cup game in the US 1994 and every single game in 1998. Again, I was the only play by play announcer. Um, don't ask me why the network did not hire a second play by play announcer for the World Cups, at least, with so many games in such a short period of time. But hey, I wasn't complaining.
No, certainly not. Right, and I mean, it makes it more difficult for me to ask you this question, I guess, because if there wasn't a lot of competition for US based, Spanish language commentary, then maybe this doesn't really apply. But I just wanted to ask for commentators, and indeed, I suppose for journalists as well, anyone working within football. Is going to and working at the World Cup the same in those roles as it is as a player? Presumably, particularly in the UK, where there's a huge number of obviously English language commentators, and there's a lot of competition for places. Presumably, it's a position of real sort of achievement and real honour to go and call games at tournaments like that. Do you feel like that, even though there wasn't as much competition for you at the time? I mean, on the basis that they clearly didn't need it.
Sure. Well, nowadays there is lots of competition, so much so that either you're a right holder and you are allowed to be accredited, you are pretty much accredited by default because you're a rights holder, or if you're not, you have to go through the US Soccer Federation and get yourself on a very, very long list. And then they will decide, or FIFA will decide, however many people from a certain country gets accredited, because there is no space and room for everyone at every World Cup. And just like I said, in my answer, when you asked me whether, after 30 plus years of calling games on television, I still have, the urge and I like going to call games, and I do it with the same passion. I always have the same analogy for journalists and broadcasters making it to the World Cup. It's the pinnacle of a player's career, and it's the moment that everyone waits for in journalism. I mean, everyone that is obviously covering football on a weekly basis, I am pretty sure yearns to be at the World Cup every 4 years. So yes, I think it's something that I look forward to every 4 years, to cover a World Cup, because it's something that it's probably the greatest sporting event in the world, and to be there in person, it's really, really nice.
You've covered football in English language as well, haven't you?
I have. I called the Sydney Olympics in 2000, both men and women's, for NBC Sports. And that was a challenge in itself, switching languages, but it was lots of fun too, as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because I mean, I don't know, but I in my spare time, I'm not a very good one, but I'm a musician, and so when I write, I often feel like I try to write with a rhythm. When I listen to football commentators, I feel like they are speaking in a kind of rhythm, and that perhaps it's a subtle thing, but I just wonder how it works in your mind when you're working. But so when you when you're sort of translating, I suppose, in your head to English in order to do that, how do you feel it affects the flow? Do you feel as free and liberated as you would be doing Spanish commentary, or what are the differences?
Well, your appreciation of what happened to me was exactly what you just said.
Right.
At the beginning, in the first couple of games, I found myself translating in my head the phrases that I would use in Spanish into English.
Yeah.
And not only was I becoming, slow in doing so, but I was kind of cheating myself and the audience. So I don't know how I made the switch. I don't know who realized. I mean, somehow I realized that I was doing this and that I wasn't very happy in the way that I was broadcasting the games. Nobody told me so. It was just, I realized that I couldn't go on this way. So I stopped translating the play-by-play. I didn't think about what was happening in Spanish to change it into English. I just let myself go into what I thought naturally in English. I mean, I'm bilingual, as you can tell.
Yeah.
I speak with a heavy accent, but I mean, I have my flow and my rhythm in English when I call games. I mean, I haven't called too many more after 2000, to be honest. But I realized that I had to just let myself go in English, and whatever came out of my mouth, they had to be processed and thought in English and not in Spanish and translated. So then I got a much better rhythm within my style, within the way I feel for the game. I didn't cheat my style, or I didn't change my style because I was speaking in English. I was as enthusiastic and effervescent as I am in Spanish, in English, but letting myself go just in the English language and not translating.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think, like, as an art form, not to compare it to football again, but obviously it's because what you are commentating on. I wonder if what you're describing, I suppose, is instinct. And I'm thinking about when I watch the football and I'm listening to I don't know if you've ever heard of Peter Drury, but he's a English language football commentator, and he's very poetic, and I think he's fantastic. But it sounds a lot of the time that he's just instinctually reacting to the game, and your journey as a viewer is not just to be told information by the commentator, but it's to almost be kind of taken on an emotional journey with them to experience the game as they do. Do you think there's a truth in that, or am I being too highfalutin about it?
No, it's 100% truth. I mean, when you're watching television, you're watching for yourself what is going on. You need to educate a little bit the people that are not very tactical savvy, but for the better part of the broadcast, you have to keep people glued to their seats and wanting to watch the game, showing a lot of passion, a lot of instinct. I mean, I can bore anyone to death, especially in the Premier League, where there are so many stats that to
Yeah.
me are totally irrelevant to the game. But I mean, I could bore my audience for 90 minutes with all the stats that I'm given every weekend to call a Premier League game. I highlight the ones that I think are best for my broadcast and my style. I really could care less if Aston Villa scored, a corner kick goal on the 12th day of September in, 1955, and they score again. Well, so be it. It doesn't. It's just a stat. It's just a figure.
Mm.
But I think that the broadcaster, the play-by-play announcer, has to be, first of all, very genuine. He has to have knowledge of the game itself. He has to be very has to have instinct of what is going on to try to anticipate. Make it fun, and most of all, be very energetic in the way he expresses himself. And at least in Spanish, that's the way I feel conceptually what encapsulates being a good play-by-play announcer. And then, trying to put as much energy into the broadcast as if the game you're doing on a weekend is the World Cup final.
And can I ask you, in terms of your preparation, let's say you're commentating on a Premier League game this weekend, for example. How do you go about preparing for that job? Because there's so much going on there, isn't there? I've seen like photographs of other commentators' notes that they take with them, and it's a bit like looking at sort of abstract paintings with every bit of the piece of paper covered in something. What's your approach to it?
I am given by our production team lots of information. It's wonderful, to tell you the truth. The way the Premier League, the statisticians, and the league itself keeps tabs on absolutely everything that is going on around the teams. So I've gone on weekends where I've called 2 to 3 games with half of my notes not unused, unread.
Yeah.
Because, as I say, I highlight what I think is are the most important stats to be given in a broadcast. So I study them. I mean, I read every single page that they send me. I highlight what I think it's the most relevant information that I need to have handy. Obviously, I do have the information of the players. I don't want to be caught unprepared in terms of whether it was the first goal of the season, and I'm not talking obviously about week 1. I'm talking about doing a game in week 12. And if Wijnaldum scores for Liverpool, I don't want to be unprepared and say that that was his first goal. You have to understand that I might have not done all 11 prior Liverpool games, so
Yeah.
I need to be prepared exactly on each player that is on the pitch, on their stats. And then I find that nowadays, the best preparation, anyways, I would say is watching the games of the week prior to that, or as many games as you can of the teams that you're going to do. So nothing will surprise you.
Yeah.
If they have a set piece that they worked on, you could anticipate that might be coming again, or that they played it that way. And just watching a lot of games, or as many games as possible. And then you can read, I can read the Liverpool Echo before anyone wakes up in Liverpool.
Yeah.
Because I have the electronic edition at midnight here in the US. People are still sleeping in Liverpool. And, by midnight, I have read tomorrow's edition of the paper, and you get lots of very good articles and life stories and things that are going on around the team and the players. So I prepare myself like that, with lots of resources, either teams' websites, local newspapers, and just general information that you can find on the web, plus all the documentation that the league sends us.
And what about, this has always interested me, pronunciations of player names. When a new player who maybe moves from a part of a league in a part of the world that we're not paying as much attention to, when he joins a league that you're commentating on, do you ever have moments where you are afraid that you have got the pronunciation wrong, or is there a procedure? Someone tells you how to say the name?
That is my obsession, to tell you the truth.
Right, yeah.
It always has been. Back in 1994, when my career really took off because of the notoriety that my work was getting here in the US, because the World Cup happened to be in the US, and our broadcasts were doing, I don't know, 70% share of the ratings, and everyone was watching. Not only did it catch everyone's attention the way I called goal, but one of the very good accolades was that my style always is to pronounce every player that touches the ball, pretty much, even though you can see it on television. But people are not, even though there might be a back and forth pass between, I don't know, David Silva and Fernandinho. I will say David Silva, Fernandinho, David Silva.
Yeah.
And one of the accolades I had in 1994 was that I tried to pronounce. I mean, my pronunciation was pretty much exactly the way every last name sounded in its original language.
Nice.
And my preparation way back then, look how old I am, or how things evolved. I've called every single embassy in the U.S.
Wow.
of the World Cup teams that played in that World Cup for help, because there was no YouTube, there was no one I could pretty much rely on.
Yeah.
No, nowadays it's very easy. Either you look up, if you look up an interview with a player, pretty much the day that they sign for the team, and they have a weird last name, most likely the team's website will ask him, "Hey, so how do you pronounce? How should we pronounce your name?" I remember just recently Bergwijn, the Dutch that came into Tottenham. They asked him, and if not, you can find the pronunciation. There's probably a YouTube video on how to pronounce it correctly. So it's much easier. So I do care a lot about pronunciation. I'm trying to think. I'm stumbling because I always have trouble with a player. I'm trying to think the player and the team, because it's an English last name. I believe it's an Irish last name, but it's very hard to pronounce because it's got an H in the middle, and I forget the team and the player.
Doherty.
Doherty from Wolverhampton now at Spurs? No, it wasn't him. I think it's Cartwright, was it?
Cartwright, yeah, maybe.
Cartwright, yeah, maybe. I don't know. But
do you know what? That's even complicated here. Like, I think there's even between England and Ireland, there are such different ways of saying those same names that I'm not sure that I don't know what is right anymore. What some of the origins are. I wanted to ask you about the difference between, or the cultural difference, I suppose, between Spanish language and English language commentary. Now, this might be unfair. I don't listen to a lot of Spanish language commentary, and the stuff that I do hear is, normally an addition to an incredible football moment. So obviously, the expectation is that there is more emotion inserted into those moments. But I get the impression that Spanish language commentary is just more passionate and more exciting than English language commentary, generally speaking, tends to be. Do you think that's true, firstly? And if it is, why is that?
I believe it's a cultural thing, and I want to be very respectful, because it might be a question of style, really. Because to generalize that I am more passionate than my English counterpart might be unfair to the person that is calling the same game in English. He might have as much passion and fire for the game and love for the game as I do, but it's just a question of style. I remember, I don't know if you've seen this, and this, going back to this point, I got, of course, being from Argentina, I followed Marcelo Bielsa's career pretty much all over the place. And I was watching the Leeds Swansea game when Pablo Hernandez scored in the 90th minute for the win, and that was like the turning point that allowed Leeds. There were like 2 or 3 weekends left in the championship, and I remember that goal. I mean, that was obviously, it was a local broadcast that I picked up. I picked it up on YouTube. It was the Leeds home broadcast. And let me tell you, I mean, they were as passionate as anyone. I mean, they lost it. I mean, I was surprised, pleasantly surprised, because usually you don't, unless, all the local team commentaries are like that. But the ones that, I've listened to for a long time are more subdued. But whoever was doing the play-by-play that day, I mean, pretty much lost it. No, yes, and no. They started yelling and saying, that this is it for sure. And I mean, there was lots of emotion in that broadcast. So again, going back to the question, I think it's pretty much cultural. We are more, I mean, you can tell, and again, it's very hard to generalize, but, just get on a tourist bus, on a hop on, hop off tourist bus in Rome, let's say, you will pretty much know who the Latin American tourists are and who the European tourists are. I mean, I've been on a train in Switzerland, just talking not out loud, just talking regularly with the folks that were with me,
Yeah.
and a lady came over and said, could you please lower your voice? So I believe it's a cultural thing to be honest. And I don't want to say because I cannot generalize that the English broadcasters are less passionate because they're probably as much they have as much passion as we do. Just they express it differently.
Yeah, I think so. And as someone from the UK myself, I think I agree. I think it is a cultural thing. I think it expands very deeply into the sort of relative psyches of each country, because you see it expressed differently in other art forms like dance as well, right? I mean, like the kind of traditional or cliche, I suppose, South American dance is a very vibrant and expressive thing. In England, I feel like people are kind of a little stuffed up. They have the passion, but there's, for whatever reason, they don't express it in quite the same way. I got to ask you one more question before I let you go, and this is purely on the basis that you are, exceptionally knowledgeable about football, and you are from Argentina. Have you been following the Lionel Messi situation over the past few weeks?
Have I?
It's a non-question, really.
I was sleepless.
What do you make of it? What's your take?
My take is that he was. I could not believe. I said it from the onset that when he announced that he was leaving, that he had to have something prearranged with another team. I could not believe that he would jump in the pool without water.
Yeah.
I think he was extremely bad. He had very, very bad advice from either his father or his lawyers. I mean, I cannot believe that his lawyers told him that he still had time to say that he was leaving and to because the release clause was still in due time to be executed. I cannot believe that this happens at that level. We're talking about the most important athlete of our time.
Yeah.
And I am sure, it wasn't an impulsive decision to say, hey, I'm leaving, and for him to send that notarized note to the team saying he was leaving. He had to have advice from the people that manage him, which was extremely poor, whoever it was. But what I cannot believe is his lawyers. I mean, there was a contractual, a very, very big contractual breakup here. So he had to have advice from lawyers, and it's unheard of what happened. I mean, how can you misinterpret what is written on the most important contract in sports history? I mean, I'm pretty sure and when I say this, I'm not talking only about the money that he earns. It's probably the most intricate contract ever, because of his image rights. There are probably so many caveats to that contract that I cannot believe how badly, what poor judgment he had to do what he did at the time that he did it. I cannot believe it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating situation. Hey, well, listen, Andres, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it, and best of luck with your 21st year working for Telemundo. Congratulations for such an incredible and long career.
Thank you very much, and good luck to all in this new Premier League season. Looking forward to it. Let's see if Liverpool can repeat. It's going to be interesting. I was really hoping that Messi would land in Manchester City so I could get to do play-by-play on his games every weekend, but I guess not. And I'll just keep enjoying the match. Yeah, maybe next year. But for now, I'll keep enjoying the magic of Liverpool, of City. Chelsea has had a terrific summer in terms of signings. Manchester United as well. So it's going to be interesting. Thank you.